React hooks are powerful, reusable functions that can be dropped into any React component of your choice, often as a one-liner. Carefully crafted, custom React hooks can abstract a lot of complexity outside of your React components. Combine that with the typing powers of TypeScript, and your React hooks can become even more powerful and easy to use. In this course, we start from a completely blank canvas and go step by step to rebuild React Use Please Stay, a React hook I've published as an NPM package that can animate both the title and favicon of a web page. It's typically used as a fun visual reminder to pull a visitor back to your website. In detailed walkthrough lessons, we'll build all the interesting features for React Use Please Stay, as well as valuable developer experience improvements, an interactive demo page, and publish the hook to NPM. Ultimately, we'll get a state-of-the-art package to use, for both the end user and developer alike. As promised, we'll be recreating React Use Please Stay truly from scratch. So, open up a terminal and create a new directory called React Use Please Stay. We'll then cd into that directory. And we'll initialize our project with npm init. Hit enter to accept the default package name, as well as the version. And for the description prompt, I'll write a fun React hook that animates the document title and or favicon when focus from the page is lost. Index.js is fine to take as the entry point for now, and we can just leave the test command blank. For the Git repository, let's quickly hop over to GitHub and prepare a repository. In my case, I of course already own a repo with the name React Use Please Stay. So instead, I'll choose the name React Use Please Stay example. And for the description, we can go ahead and copy the description we used in our package.json and paste that in right here. We can create our repository, and we could go ahead and copy this URL. Back in our npm init, we can paste this URL in, and for the keywords, I'll do React, TypeScript, React hook, React hooks. And I'll put my name in. And for the license, I'll choose MIT. I like to use the MIT license since it's more explicit and detailed than the ISC license. And we can confirm by typing yes. And it looks like everything worked. If we open up the code here in this folder, we can see that package.json was properly generated, and it's currently the only file in our project folder right now. Now let's get started installing the initial dependencies for our hook. First, we of course have React, and a major part of this course will be about how we can use patterns in TypeScript with React hooks. So let's install TypeScript also, but as a dev dependency. So that's save dev TypeScript. And we'll also install the types for React, also as a dev dependency. Within package.json, we should move React out of the dependencies list and move it into a peer dependencies list. Unfortunately, there's no npm or node command to do this automatically from the command line, so we'll have to do it manually. So I'll just simply add peer and capitalize this D here for peer dependencies. Let's now create a tsconfig.json file. And within tsconfig.json, we will set the compiler options. Just setting an outdir to dist. JSX is React. And we will skip the lib check. We'll then create a new src folder. So mkdir src, And within src, we'll create a folder called hooks. Then we will finally create our star of the show, usepleasestay.ts. Note that since this is a React hook, I don't foresee that we'll need any JS syntax. So that's why we're using the TS file extension instead of .tsx. For now, in usepleasestay, we'll simply export an empty function named usepleasestay. So we've got essentially the most bare bones TypeScript React hook you could possibly have. Let's make a build script in package.json to make sure that everything is working. In package.json, let's add the script build. And for us, for now, that is simply the TypeScript compiler, which is TSC. Save your package.json file, and we can run this script now by issuing npm run build. And it looks like we've forgotten to set a proper lib value in our tsconfig, so we can add that now. And for now, we'll just do what TypeScript recommends, which is to set this value to ES215 or later. And the lib property is an array, so we'll add it like so. We can save that and rerun our build script. With that fixed, the TypeScript compiler shouldn't report any errors. And if we look into our dist folder, we can see that usepleasestay.js file is produced as expected. Let's add a README to our project. This will become more important later as we add documentation to it on how to use our hook, but for now, we can just put the name of the package in it. And using a single pound symbol to denote that it's a title, we'll just simply put the name of the package, React use, please stay. We can also paste in our description from package.json in as well. And this is a pretty decent default go-to for initially creating a README. Last but certainly not least, we should create a gitignore file. And for now, we will ignore just the node modules folder. And for now, that's all the parts we need in place to start implementing and building our hook. In summary, we created a new project using npm init, which created this package.json file. We created a GitHub Git repository for our project. We added React as a dependency, and we added both the React types and TypeScript packages as dev dependencies. We created a TypeScript config with some basic settings. We wrote an empty function as to where the majority of our hook's logic will live. And we finally built the project as a test to see if all our TypeScript tooling was configured properly. In the next lesson, we'll leverage Create React App to build a simple React application where we will be able to test our hook as we build it. Before going any further, we'll create an example app that we can actually use to call our hook. We will use the Create React App package with a TypeScript template. First, we'll create an example folder. So that's make_dir example. We'll move into that folder. And now we'll scaffold a new Create React App with the template flag of TypeScript. In other words, that's -- template TypeScript. So that's npx create react app -- template TypeScript. And I want to scaffold it in this directory, and that's why I use the period, which means here in the example directory. So our project is done scaffolding, and right away we are going to remove from the src folder app.css, app.test.tsx, index.css, logo svg, and setup tests. We'll also remove any references to those files in index.tsx and app.tsx. So we can get rid of the logo and the app CSS. And also the index CSS in index.tsx. Now here, saving in index.tsx, everything looks fine. TypeScript doesn't give us any warnings or errors. But here in app.tsx, we get a warning because we've removed the logo. But we actually don't need any of the markup here in app.tsx. So I'm just going to return a fragment. Now we need to import our hook from our root src folder. Let's make a hook folder within the example src folder so we have a place to put our hook. Unfortunately, Create React App won't let us import files from outside its own src folder. For now, we'll write a bash script to copy over our hook. Later, we'll see how we can use npm link to use the React use please stay package directly in our example React app. For now, using a bash script is a solution that will work well for initial tests. In the package.json of the example app, let's create a new script called copy hook. And this script is going to be cp for copy. And we just want to copy the hook from the root src folder to the src hooks folder in this project. And ensuring that we're in the root folder of the example project, we should be able to run this script. So we can do npm run copy hook. And of course, we now see a copy of use please stay within the example src hooks folder. Finally, we can import this hook we just copied into app.tsx to see if everything is running smoothly. And we can start up our app with npm run start. Looks like everything compiled successfully, no warnings, no issues found. And of course, our app is quite boring right now. It's just a blank page since we've removed all the markup from app.tsx. But the goal here has been achieved. We've copied our hook in and we're ready to start building it and testing it. In summary, we scaffolded a React TypeScript application with Create React App. We removed all unnecessary files from the application. We created a custom bash script to copy the hook into this example app. We imported the hook into app.tsx, and we started the application to make sure that everything was working. In the next lesson, we'll start writing the first functionalities for our hook. Let's finally get started with the first functionality of our hook. To start, we'll focus on being able to display and looping through an array of titles passed to the hook. First, open up the use please stay file and ensure that that's the one in the root src directory and not the one in the example folder. Now, let's allow our hook to accept parameter titles, which will be type array string. Next, we want the document title to animate when the tab has lost focus. Luckily, JavaScript provides a visibility change event that we can add a listener to. As soon as our hook mounts, we'll begin listening for this event. We can do this with React's useEffect hook, being sure to provide the empty dependency array so it fires on mount only. And we'll call the actual event listener function handle visibility change. And as I mentioned, since we only want this to run on mount, we'll pass an empty dependency list to the useEffect hook. Now, the first TypeScript error we have is that TypeScript cannot find the types for document since we haven't included DOM in our libcompiler options. So let's go to the tsconfig.json in our root and add the DOM library to the list of libraries. It's also a best practice to remove listener functions whenever a React hook unmounts. This is possible within our useEffect hook by returning a function from useEffect. Whatever is in this returned function is fired as part of the unmounting process. We can use this function to remove our event listener. So let's return, I'll use an arrow function and document.remove event listener, visibility change, and the same function, handle visibility change. Now we need to actually write our handle visibility change function. When the value of document.visibilityState is not visible, we should be iterating through the titles provided to our hook. Otherwise, we should stop iterating through those titles. We can track whether or not we should be iterating through these titles using a React state variable. Let's create a state variable and setter pair using React's useState hook. I will call them should iterate titles and set should iterate titles. And initially, this will be set to false. We can import that. And so our handle visibility change function becomes set should iterate titles based on the value of document.visibility state and when it does not equal visible. So we now have a stateful variable that changes when the visibility of the page changes. That's great, but we need to add functionality to actually modify the document title. For this, we'll leverage JavaScript's setInterval function. However, we can't use setInterval right away. It's not the best idea to use setInterval directly with React hooks. Like our document change function, we also need to account for cleanup and any intervals we set up to prevent memory leaks. This is a bit tricky to do in React, but it's definitely doable. Let's begin by writing a new custom React hook useInterval. So we'll make a new file right alongside usePleaseStay called useInterval. So this will be export const useInterval. And for the parameters passed to this hook, we'll at least need a callback or whatever we want to run at the given interval. And the interval itself, which will be a number. The first thing we'll do is store a reference to the callback that's passed in, and we'll do this with the React hook useRef. We then need to make sure that every time callback changes, we're updating the current value of the callback ref. So once again, we require the use of useEffect. And whenever this callback changes, we're going to update the current value of the callback ref. Finally, we can get to using JavaScript's built-in setInterval function. So we'll create another useEffect, and this one will fire whenever the interval changes. So what we'll do is store the interval ID from setInterval, and we'll call the current callback ref. And of course, at the interval provided. And as mentioned, the whole reason we're creating this custom hook is so we can have proper cleanup of this set interval. So just as we did in usePleaseStay, we'll use the return function in useEffect here to clean up this ID. And that can be done by calling JavaScript's built-in clear interval function with the intervals ID. We should also have a way to start and stop this set interval call from running. Let's add a parameter should run type Boolean to our hook. We can add should run to the dependency array in our second useEffect hook. And when should run switches to false, we can simply return from this effect. And we now have a React lifecycle safe way of using set interval. Let's jump back into usePleaseStay and start using useInterval. And as we said, the trigger for iterating through our titles is this should iterate titles. And so for now, I will throw it into our useInterval function, just with an empty function. We'll do 500 milliseconds as the interval and use that should iterate title state variable as the should run trigger. And within this body will be the actual logic that triggers the document title change. Let's first create another state variable that will keep track of the current index of the titles array. I'll just call that title index. And its initial value will be 0. And within the interval function, we'll first create a const called nextIndex just for improved readability, which will be title index plus 1. And to safely set our title index, we will use a ternary by checking if the next index is already at the titles.length. We will start back at 0. Otherwise, we're safe to set the title index to that next index. Now finally, we've arrived at the user-facing functionality of our hook, and that is setting the value of document.title. We can use another useEffect here, where the dependencies will be the titles themselves and also the title index. And since we've hooked into the title index, every 500 milliseconds, when this useInterval hook fires and updates the title index, we just need to set document.title to titles at the title index. So I'm going to clean this up, save this, and now let's try out our hook to see if it's working as expected. First, let's be sure that we're in the example project root. So I'm going to cd into the example folder. And before we run our custom script to copy the hook in, we also need to copy in useInterval since it's used by usePleaseStay. So let's extend our script in the example package.json to do that. So I'm going to keep this command, and I'm also just going to copy the useInterval hook to the folder here in our example project. And now we can run our copy hook script. And in the call to usePleaseStay in app.tsx, we'll need to add our newly required array of title strings. We can see, of course, that TypeScript is already complaining. It expects us to pass in our titles array. So we'll just pass in something like title 1, title 2, and title 3. Now we can start up our example app with NPM start. And here in the browser, if we have this React app in focus, we should of course see title 1. And as we expect, the titles should not be iterating because this tab is in focus. However, as soon as we open another browser tab, we see, as expected, our titles are iterating as provided. So in summary, we created an onMount use effect hook to listen to when the visibility change event fires. And we also added in the cleanup step to remove that event listener should this hook be unmounted. And we set up a state variable to be set according to the document.visibility state. We then wrote a custom useInterval hook, which we would use to run our title changing functionality when should iterate titles goes to true. And finally, we hooked into both the titles and the title index in that every time the title index changes, we set the document title according to the title's value at that title index. So we've already got a fully functioning React hook. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to package our hook as an NPM module using rollup. The size of our code base is already expanding, and we can imagine how cumbersome it will be to continually modify and run our copy hook script in our example project. Let's package our code as an NPM module so we can use it directly in our example app via NPM link. We will now install 3 packages as dev dependencies. The first is rollup, the second is the standard TypeScript plugin for rollup, and the third is tslib, which is required by the TypeScript rollup plugin. So that is npm install, save deb, rollup, then the rollup plugin TypeScript, and tslib. Now we'll create a rollup.config.js file in the project root. And within this file, we'll first import the TypeScript plugin. We'll import the package as pkg from package.json. We can't use the word package directly since that's a reserved word. And we'll also need to assert type JSON for a JSON import. And here we'll set up our config. So we're going to export default. First, we need to define an input for rollup to go off of. That will be an index.ts file, which we have yet to make. And the output for the file, we'll use the package.json main key. It's going to be a module. We do want source maps. And we'll set strict to false. We need to pass in the TypeScript plugin, which is a function. And the external library that we're using is React. Next, we need to update our build script, and instead of using TSC, our build script becomes rollup-c. The -c flag tells rollup to use our rollup config file when packaging. Finally, we'll need to expose the files that we want to package, in this case, the usepleasestay.ts file. And to do that, we'll create a new index.ts file right in the src root. And from here, we'll just export use please stay from hooks use please stay. We'll also need to allow synthetic default imports for rollup to work, since React itself is a synthetic default import. So we'll need to add that to our tsconfig. And we'll also set declaration to true. That means TypeScript will create a type declaration for us when rollup does its building. And outside of the compiler options, we should also be sure to define and tell the TypeScript compiler which files we want to include and those we wish to exclude during the build process. And for us, we'd like to include the src folder, and we'd like to be sure to exclude the example folder. Since our use please stay hook is about to become an NPM module, we need to inform NPM of this within package.json. And we can do that by adding type module to the JSON. And while we're in package.json, we should also update the main value here. As you remember, we're using it in our config to specify the output file. And so if we were to leave it as index.js, our distribution version would be built directly in the root folder, which is not what we want, but rather we'd like to target the dist folder. So that can be updated by adding dist in front of the index.js file. Let's now try packaging our hook with our new build command. So it looks like our build is working fine, and to double check, we can look in the dist folder. We should have the following files and folders. Within hooks, we should have the type declaration for both use interval and use please stay. And in the root of dist, we should have 3 files: the type declaration, the actual distributable index of the hook, and the source map file. If you still have use please stay.js in this folder, you should delete it. So I will also delete it. Now, to be able to use npm link, we have to make a few more properties in package.json. First, since this is a module with types, thanks to TypeScript's type declaration files, we should also specify the types property as dist index.d.ts. We then should also provide the files property. This tells npm all relevant files needed for our package. In our case, it's the dist folder where rollup placed all our packaged files. npm expects this to be an array, so we will pass it. So we will be sure to pass it as an array. And with that done, we should now be able to run npm link. Before we can use this linked package in our example app, we need to be sure to link to a single version of React. In our case, we want the version of React that is used in the example folder. Ensuring that you're still inside the root directory, we can link to the React version present in the node modules folder of the example project. So that would be npm link, the example folder, node modules, and React. Now we can move into the example folder and link our package. To double check that the link worked, you can issue npm ls location global depth 0 and link true. Now let's run our example app to see if everything is still working as expected. Now that the app's up and running, we do still see the title toggling effect, just as we had in the previous lesson. So it looks like everything is working. As a cleanup, within the example app's package.json, we can get rid of our copy hook script and also delete the hooks folder from the project. In summary, we installed rollup, the TypeScript plugin, and tslib. We created a rollup config file that gives rollup the instructions to package our hook. We created an index.ts file to expose our hook file. We modified our package.json file and set important properties needed to package our hook. We linked our package to our example project. And we finally imported our hook directly from our linked package and ran our example project to make sure that everything was working. In the next lesson, we will clean up and refactor what we have built so far. With the new ability of using NPM link to test our hook, it'll be much easier for us to do some refactoring and cleanup in the source codebase. The desired functionality we've described for our hook is working, but looking inside the source of use please stay, the code itself is a little bit hard to follow. It's fairly clean, but to fully understand it, we have to jump around all these use effect and use interval hooks and all the parts of state to follow the full chain of logic as to how it all works together. We're going to further clean up our custom hook by encapsulating certain parts of the logic to small, easy to understand files. Let's go through use please stay here from top to bottom and refactor it as we go. And so the first refactor we'll make is with the visibility change event listeners and side effects. We can create a new hook called use listen to visibility change on mount. So we will export const use listen to visibility change on mount. And we can cut and paste the handle visibility change function as well as the onMount use effect hook into our new hook. All we have to do now is pass the set should iterate titles state setter function into our hook. As well as use effect from React. We can clean that up. And now we've replaced that logic that we've cut out of our root hook with this use listen to visibility change on mount, being sure to pass in the state setter function. And to guide developers who may later read this hook, we can leave a little comment to describe exactly what is going on inside this hook. And so I'll say sets the should iterate titles value whenever page visibility is lost. Also, I'll write handles removing the event listener in cleanup as well. Likewise, we can encapsulate these bottom two effects into a new custom hook, which I'll call use title change effect. With this refactor, we can now see that both title index and set title index are unused. So this is perfect for us. We can move this entire part of state into the new hook. Now let's add the required parameters titles and should iterate titles, as well as import use state, use interval, and use effect. And I'll clean that up. And back in use please stay, let's make sure that use title change effect is being used properly. And we need to forward on the titles as well as the should iterate titles. And just like we did for use listen to visibility change on mount, I'll also leave a small comment here to help describe to developers what exactly is going on in the use title change effect. And so we can just write modifies the document.title of the page whenever should iterate titles is true. And we can remove these unused imports. and we should be all set. Our hook is now much more clear and easy to read. The code in our entry point file, which is here, use please stay, gives us a pretty good high-level overview of how the major parts of the hook work. If we need details or want to add features later at deeper levels, we can go into either use listen to visibility change on mount or use title change effect. As a double check, let's rebuild the hook, fire up the example app, and check to see that everything is working. And so, as expected, we still see the exact same functionality. And when I come back to the page, of course, the iteration stops. In summary, we created a new hook called use listen to visibility change on mount and moved the entire visibility change event listener logic into it. We then created a new hook called use title change effect, and we moved the corresponding use interval and use effect logic into it. We imported and used both these hooks in use please stay, and for both, we left a nice descriptive comment to help developers in the future who may look into the source code of this hook. That's all for Module 1 of this course. In Module 2, we'll start building out more advanced and fun features for use please stay.
Thanks for watching. If you want to keep learning, click the link in the description below.